And good afternoon. Welcome to program number 51. 51 consecutive months the governor of Louisiana has come before the people of our state in this realm. And your number again is 877-217-5757 for Ask the Governor. And the Governor John Bel Edwards joining us. I think we just lost him, Matt, telephonically. We are in the COVID-19 age. And of course, we're doing our best to practice social distancing. And this is the third consecutive month we are doing this by telephone. And while we get the governor aboard, we will certainly get his take on the world at large. And there is much to discuss with the governor amid a pandemic. About 3,000 souls in Louisiana have been lost to coronavirus. And it was more than 3 months ago, to be precise, 3 months and 1 day ago, that the governor imposed his stay-at-home order. And now we are in phase 2, and we'll get his take on where we go from here. The cases have been going down in Louisiana, but in other parts of the country, in 6 states in particular, there have been spikes in what is happening. And Matt, can you bring him up? There we go. Governor John Bel Edwards, nice to share the microphone with you again. And before we get started, we have people, of course, waiting to talk with you. What is your take on where we are right now with coronavirus?
Well, at noon today, we got a report, and I don't know whether you or your listeners have been able to get the numbers, but today we're reporting 928 new cases, which is a higher normal number than we've been seeing over the last number of days. About 129 of those are backlogged. There are old cases that are coming from some labs that are just now reporting. The good news is the number of people in hospital went down by just a handful over yesterday. And we do have 20 deaths that we're reporting today. And of course, every one of those is somebody's mother or father, aunt or uncle, whatever, and so we grieve the loss of everyone. It is true that we're doing much, much better than we were several weeks ago. But quite frankly, we're a little bit concerned about the hospitalizations because prior to the day we had 3 consecutive days of increases in hospitalizations, not with big numbers, but nevertheless 3 days of increases, and we haven't seen that in many weeks. So it's a mixed bag, and we are continuing to work really hard, trying to implement the White House Coronavirus Task Force recommendations, the CDC recommendations, and so forth. And again, while we're doing much better, we still have a ways to go. And this virus is going to be with us for quite some time. It is obvious now that the heat and humidity is not going to stamp it out, and so forth. So we do need people to take it very seriously. Avoid large crowds. Make sure that you wear your mask or face covering. Keep 6 feet distance between yourself and others who are not part of your immediate household. Stay home when you are sick. And I will tell you another area that we're making progress is just the sheer number of tests that we are administering. Already in the month of June, we have a goal of 200,000 tests. We're right at 160,000 already, and it's just the 17th of June. So much of the additional cases that we are detecting is a function of the additional tests. But what that tells us, though, is a case is a case, and so there's a lot of COVID out there. A lot of it is spreading around, and we know that asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic individuals can spread it, and that's why wearing the mask is so important, and people can't wait till they feel badly or have some symptoms of COVID before they do that, because by that time it may be too late and they may have spread it. So anyway, we continue to work extremely hard. I'm at GOSEP right now from where we had our UCG meeting earlier today, and then a call with the National Governors Association to discuss all these issues as well. So I'm just encouraging the people to be patient and understand this is with us for a while, and we're still very much in the thick of it.
877-217-5757, your Ask the Governor number. Governor John Bel Edwards with us for the full hour. Let's start with Thomas in New Orleans listening on WWNO. Thomas, you're on the air with the governor.
How you doing this afternoon? I have one comment and one question. My first comment is that I've talked to a nurse that's very prominent in New Orleans where I live, She told me there's a lot of cases with the Abbott testing that's been inaccurate. She was saying that 50% of the testing is inaccurate, and they have more people out there that have been tested negative, but they actually have the coronavirus, the symptoms of it. Secondly, when are we going to put an end to all of this taking these statues down? I understand, we have to be cognizant of the people, with civil rights, what happened in the 1870s and 1900s and stuff with the civil rights in the 1960s, but we can't change every street name. Andrew Jackson, Christopher Columbus, and all these, Robert E. Lee, it's part of our heritage, it's part of our culture. We can change people's mindsets, but as far as changing every statue and changing every street name, it's getting a bit ridiculous, Governor.
All right, Governor, would you please respond to Thomas in New Orleans? Thank you, Thomas.
And I had a little hard time understanding the question, at least the first part of it. And I think he indicated that he spoke to a nurse who told him that somewhere around 50% of the coronavirus tests are yielding inaccurate results. Like that is a number far higher than anything that I've seen. Now, on the serology testing, we know that there is a false number of cases of results out there, a good number of them. That's the testing for antibodies, not the testing for the actual virus on the front end. And the FDA approves tests. We know that there were a good many serology tests that were pushed out without approval. That has been somewhat problematic. On the other side, testing for the virus itself, I'm not aware of any tests that are yielding that kind of an error rate. So I'm just not familiar with what Thomas is talking about. We believe the tests that we're administering are largely accurate, and certainly that's true for the test for the virus itself. Anybody who has a result on a serology test, if it comes back as positive, meaning that you have antibodies, you really need to confirm that with a second serology test for sure.
51st installment of this program, heard every month on stations across Louisiana and in some other states. And your number again is 877-21757, and is also seen statewide by Jerry Mayer's Hometown Productions. And he is in studio with us. The governor is at GOSEP, where he is monitoring the conditions of our state in the coronavirus age. And right now we have unrest in our streets in America. And the last show was May 20th. 5 days after that, May 25th, George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And as a result, a series of incidents have occurred, not so pleasant. And there is a call now for any people associated with segregation or slavery to be removed from the history books in cities across our country. And Governor, it's a case in which we have a long legacy of this, unfortunately, in our country. Where do we draw the line?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not exactly sure that I can articulate an answer. I will tell you that we've had a number of protests and demonstrations here in Louisiana since the death of George Floyd, as you mentioned. And the overwhelming majority of those have been entirely peaceful, nonviolent, without property damage or destruction. And so we really appreciate that. And I think that says a lot about the people here in Louisiana. And certainly we support people exercising their First Amendment rights. We went through this, as you will recall, back in 2016 with our own incident here in Louisiana dealing with Mr. Alton Sterling's death here in Baton Rouge. And as far as the monuments and so forth goes, that especially in New Orleans, we had experience with this particular issue a few years ago as well. I will tell you that we have to be very careful. And I know I don't think you meant to say this, but you talked about erasing the history books. Now, the history is history, and the history books ought to reflect what happened and be factually accurate. The question for us today and going forward is which characters out of those history books are we going to literally put on a pedestal? That's very much up for debate. That's a conversation that's taken place all over the place. I do want to get back because somebody here with better ears heard Thomas's question better than I did. I think he may have been specifically referring to the Abbott point-of-care testing. That is one of the tests that has the highest error rate that has been approved by the FDA. And Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci have recommended that states use that in certain surveillance-type testing, in point-of-care testing. So maybe in nursing homes where you're going to test 100% of the people. And then for those people who do test positive, to make sure that you are following those up with other tests to try to make sure that you get good results. But the Abbott test has proved to be one of the ones with the highest error rate. I have not heard that it approaches 50%, but that I guess in certain instances that may be accurate. So I wanted to come back and give him a more complete answer to his question because I had not heard it appropriately.
Julie in Baton Rouge on WRKF. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Yes, I have a question about mask wearing. I know you said it should be mandatory for businesses who are dealing with the public. I have not been finding that in a number of places. I'm in a risk category, so I'm very careful where I go and what time I do it. But I find that the more time goes on, the less not only customers are not wearing masks, but business owners are not wearing their mask. When is it mandatory, and why can't it be mandatory? I realize it may be problematic to enforce that.
Governor, would you respond to Julie, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So in the proclamations we've issued, it is mandatory for business owners and for their employees who are interacting with the public to have masks on. So anybody on so for example, if you've got a restaurant open and you've got cooks in the back who are not interacting with customers, then they don't have to have their mask on. But from the time you walk through the door, if you're greeted by an employee or waited on by an employee, they should have a mask on. And that's the same at other retail establishments and so forth. So that is mandatory. It is very important. Now, we strongly recommend that everybody wear a mask anytime they're outside of their household and interacting with people who are, and whether they're outside or inside, by the way, and interacting with people who are not from their immediate households, they need to have a mask on. And it is because this virus is primarily spread by airborne particles that come from people coughing, sneezing, speaking, breathing, and so forth. And so we know a lot of the spread comes from people who are positive but will never be symptomatic, or it can come from someone who is pre-symptomatic, meaning that up to 48 hours before they develop a symptom, they actually are contagious. They have a viral load, and they can spread it. And that's why people need to wear a mask and not wait until they don't feel well. By the way, if you don't feel well, we're asking you to stay home, but you can't wait till then. Now, we choose here, and I think in just about every state, there may be an exception out there, not to make it mandatory for the public to always have one on, simply put, because we don't believe it would be enforceable in terms of trying to get people to do that from a mandate perspective. But it is incredibly important that people do it. And I would encourage you, Julie, if you go to a restaurant to any business, and you don't believe that the business is conducting itself in the way that it should so that it's safe, don't patronize that business. And if you will do that, and if others will do that, I think we would have a lot more compliance, and then people would be a lot safer as we re-engage more of our economy, bring more customers back into our stores and restaurants, and get more people back to work.
Heidi in Homa. Heidi, good afternoon. I think Heidi is on line 3. There we go. Heidi, good morning or good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards. Heidi?
Hello.
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes. Hi, Governor. I'm a school teacher from Louisiana, and we were just wondering, how should we prepare for the upcoming school year? Should we continue with preparing for distance learning, or should we prepare to go back as business as usual? we like to prepare during the summer so that we are effective. So we just kind of want to know which direction do you think it might be heading into?
Well, Heidi, thank you very much for the call. More than that, thank you for being an educator. I had an opportunity to speak with Dr. Cade Brumley, the new superintendent of education, this morning. In fact, he briefed the UCG meeting. We expect that in the next couple of weeks that the superintendent of education here in the state of Louisiana is going to put out a considerable amount of information about our plans going forward with respect to education. Quite frankly, I expect that those plans will include reopening of our school campuses to students on time in August. Now, having said that, things aren't going to look exactly like they have in the past with respect to the way we educate kids and how they interact with one another and whether they go to the lunchroom and how many, how we bus them and so forth. But so there's a way to do this safely. We're looking at best practices from around the country, but also looking to CDC for guidance, the U.S. Department of Education, and working here with the Office of Public Health as well on all of these things. And by the way, this is happening with higher education too. So within a couple of weeks, you're going to get more information on this. But I will tell you, we have to be prepared to deliver education through distance learning. First of all, it's just an important component of education in the year 2020 regardless. But even if we're able to open our schools on time and get students back on campuses in August, it's always possible that this virus, this pandemic, spikes again later this year. And for safety reasons, we may have to go back to distance learning. So one of the main areas that I'm going to be spending the GEAR funding that I got, the discretionary funding for it's called the Emergencies Education Emergency Relief Fund, GEAR funding, is on devices and connectivity so that more students will be able to access the internet on a device and engage in that distance learning. So that's going to be part of what we do going forward as well. And these are tough times for everybody. That's particularly true for educators and for students and for families. And that's why I wanted to start off by thanking you for being an educator. And I know that you'll do your best to make sure that your students are well educated regardless of the circumstances. But within the next 10 days to 14 days, I think you're going to receive considerable information from the State Department of Education.
Sean in New Orleans. Sean, you were on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hi, Governor. Gloria Dean Williams, Louisiana's longest-serving incarcerated woman, affectionately known as Mama Glow, was recommended for commutation of sentence by the Louisiana Parole Board 331 days ago. In fact, between the date of your reelection and your first public statements about the coronavirus, over 3.5 months passed without any action from you on her recommendation. Since then, of course, as you probably know, Mama Glow herself was hospitalized with COVID-19 and subsequently returned to prison. Can you tell us whether you intend to sign her recommendation as well as the recommendations of other incarcerated individuals?
Well, first of all, Sean, thank you for calling in. I am very familiar with that particular file. And, obviously I receive more recommendations than I sign. And I don't engage publicly in the specifics on any particular file. It is true that I have received that file some time ago. I'm aware of the recommendation, otherwise it wouldn't have come to me. But at the end of the day, I have to feel comfortable with a particular file before I can sign it. I am just not there on Mama Glow, and I'm going to reserve any further comment on that.
Chris in New Orleans. Chris, good afternoon. You're on the air with Governor John Bel Edwards. Hi, Chris.
Yes, hello.
Yes, sir. Chris, you go ahead.
First of all, Governor, I want to thank you for your inspired leadership through this crisis. Secondly, I want to ask you, have you thought at all about how you could help the hospitality workers, restaurant, bar workers, et cetera, around
All right. What about helping hospitality workers in this time? Thank you, Chris. Governor?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great question, and thank you for the nice comments too, Chris. Obviously, this is a very difficult time, and without people traveling in the numbers that they did, and we know that they're not, then we know that our restaurants, our attractions, our hotels, they just don't have the number of customers, and as a result, many of those employees are not able to work. Now, what we have done is we've been administering unemployment compensation at record levels, both in terms of the amounts that we're paying out in the aggregate, but also the amounts we're paying out per worker if it's COVID related and they're entitled to it. The benefit just from the federal government on that part is $600 a week. Plus additional assistance for pandemic unemployment assistance can be another $207, and that's in addition to the state.
If you receive a busy signal, please be patient because obviously many across the state are trying to talk with the governor of Louisiana. He does this once a month, and this is show number 51. And Governor, I know you were imploring people to participate in the census. Right now, the numbers show Louisiana is slightly behind the national rate, and there's a lot of activity that needs to be taking place in order for our state to be counted properly.
Yeah, we're slightly behind in one sense. 55.7% of Louisianans have submitted a self-response, but that's compared to 61.4% for the nation. But we are dead last in the Gulf South, in the Deep South. So this is important. I'm asking people to respond, fill out that census form, get it back. This is our chance that we only get once every 10 years. The federal government relies on all this information to help guide distribution of about $1.5 trillion worth of spending across 316 federal programs, from Medicaid, the student loans, highway construction, low-income tax credits. I mean, you name it. And as you know, Jim, it also feeds into the redistricting that we see once every 10 years as we draw new boundaries from everything from school board members to legislators to members of Congress and the Supreme Court. So I am asking everybody to fill out those forms and get that information back in so that we don't miss out on this opportunity.
We are in the midst of a special session, and there has been much activity, and you opted to veto a bill that is designed by its proponents to reduce insurance rates, but some believe it would not accomplish that. Why did you decide to go against the bill, Governor?
Well, first of all, I will tell you, they say it's designed to do that, but if you read the language in the bill, it authorized insurance companies to increase their rates if it went into law as well. But everybody acknowledges that version on the last day in the conference committee report, there was a major error that was included in that legislation. And so we have an opportunity now. We're in a special session. The call for the special session includes room for more legislation on this topic. Legislation is pending. I am trying to work with leadership in the House and the Senate in order to get a good piece of legislation, one that is a good compromise in order to move it forward. We've still got some work to do, but the conversations I've had up till today, at least, have been very promising. There are certain parts of that bill that I actually offered myself whenever I was a legislator. At that time, it was the insurance industry who didn't like that proposal. But we're going to keep working on it and try to get something done. But I will tell you, we need to make sure that insurance companies are not allowed to base their premiums on whether someone's a blue-collar worker or a white-collar worker, or whether they have a poor credit history even though they have a superior driving record, and so forth. Those are critically important things too that we can do for the state of Louisiana, and we need to work on this from a holistic perspective. And I did want to say something, Jim. It's a little bit clumsy for me to be not in the studio, because I know that when you get ready to go to break, you can't raise your hand and give me that signal. So I want to apologize to you and the listeners because it's not been very smooth today. I'll try to do better.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Now, you did sign some bills expanding gun rights that passed by big margins in the legislature. You have made your case about how you stand on this issue, but was it a tough call on these particular bills?
No, I mean, look, we actually have had legislation that I remember was introduced by Henry Burns years ago with respect to having guns in churches if it's approved by the pastor and the leadership of the church and the individuals have training and so forth. So that was not a new subject matter for us at all. And in fact, the permission of the pastor is still going to be required, the leader of the church, in order for people to engage in concealed carry there. So if a church doesn't want it, then they don't have to have it. Secondly, with respect to when we have an emergency as to whether we're going to declare as essential certain things related to the Second Amendment, that's exactly how we function in this public, or are functioning in this public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus. So that wasn't new. And the third instrument that was authored by Blake Miguez deals with concealed carry permits and where individuals can actually engage in concealed carry if they have that license, that permit. And we know that we don't have crime happening out there because of people using firearms who have these permits. And so that one really wasn't any real blockbuster issue either. Look, everybody knows that I have been a strong proponent of the Second Amendment and so forth. But those three bills this year, quite frankly, I found them to be relatively on the moderate side.
Let's go to Penny in New Orleans, has been waiting patiently. Penny, you're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hi, good afternoon, Governor.
Hi, Penny.
Hi. I wanted to thank you for vetoing HB 197 about the critical infrastructure.
Yes, ma'am.
And you've made rectifying health inequities a priority of yours during this COVID crisis. Research shows that air pollution worsens viral outcomes. As you know, Formosa Plastics is planning to build a huge 14-unit facility which would threaten the health of communities of color in the petrochemical corridor, as well as worsen the climate crisis. Will you work to reverse the erroneous LDEQ approval of the Formosa plant?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Penny, for your call. And with respect to health equity, it is incredibly important. And the inequities have been illustrated vividly by the workings of this particular pandemic. For example, even though the number has gotten a little lower, it's still just a little lower than 60% of the deaths in Louisiana have been by African Americans, even though they're only 32 to 33% of the overall population. So this is a real issue, something that we have to get to the bottom of. And we know that with respect to this coronavirus, at least, what it's the comorbidities at issue are heart disease, kidney disease, hypertension, diabetes, for example. So we have to really study this, make sure that we reduce the prevalence of these comorbidities in the African American population, but really across the population as a whole. And the work that we do is going to benefit everyone. I can't agree with Penny that the DEQ determination was erroneous as it relates to a particular permit. Obviously, if that's the case, if they believe that's the case, a court might agree with them. I don't think so. But we're going to make sure that we're enforcing all of the applicable standards, whether it's air or water or you name it, with respect to the environment. We're going to do that in Louisiana.
Governor, a couple of days ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 vote with Neil Gorsuch writing the deciding opinion the majority opinion that people cannot be fired for sexual orientation in this country. You and the Attorney General have been involved in a fight along these lines. What are your thoughts about this decision from the High Court?
Well, look, I've always said, and this goes back to my initial campaign for governor, that prejudice and discrimination just aren't Louisiana values. We're beyond that today. I don't believe that individuals ought to lose a job or potentially not receive a state service because they happen to be a member of the LGBT community. And and I issued an executive order to that effect in 2016. That's when the Attorney General stepped in. I knew then we were on the right side of the history, and I believe that was validated this week with that Supreme Court decision. I just think everybody has a right to survive and to thrive and to do well, and you simply can't do that if you can't get and hold a job, and you shouldn't be fired from a job because of something that has nothing to do with job performance.
Kevin in Watson. Kevin, you're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hello?
Kevin, yes, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I just had an offbeat question for you. Have you ever considered becoming the president?
Okay. All right, there we go. The governor.
I'm not going to say never, because I think every young person at some point entertains that idea. But no, that's not something that I have spent any time thinking about. And Jim will remember several years ago, I was on his program, and he just asked me if I was going to run for governor, and I had already decided I was, and I said yes. Well, it was about 6 months before my wife would speak to me, so I'm not going to make any news like that today.
And we are set to have a race over the last 19 weeks of the campaign between Democrat Joe Biden and the incumbent Republican Donald Trump. The president has gotten along well with Governor Edwards, although he did campaign mightily against him. How do you see that race evolving, Governor?
It's really interesting, I think, because you've got a situation where COVID-19 is gonna be with us and change every part of what we do for the foreseeable future, and that's through the election date as well. But I will simply say what I told the president on the Monday after my reelection, and what I reaffirmed to him when I went to the White House recently, and that is, for me, my election is over. It's all about governing now, and there's never been a more important time to focus on governing and working with our federal partners and our local partners and so forth, and that is what I'm focused on. As you can imagine, Jim, I've got more than I can say grace over right now. We're in a special session. Our economy went from one of the best in the country to having problems because of COVID-19 like others, and we've got this public health emergency and so forth. And I'm going to continue to work with the White House Coronavirus Task Force with our federal partners to do everything that I can to help put the people of Louisiana in the best possible shape now and going forward.
Would you at any point in your career entertain a cabinet position?
I guess if you get asked that question from someone, you would have to give it some consideration. It's not anything that I'm focused on or think about right now. I'm interested in being governor of the state of Louisiana. As you know, I ran a very vigorous campaign last year, won despite the president coming down 3 times to campaign against me and an awful lot of money being spent against me. And I'm just focused on the job. It's never been more important. And quite frankly, I'm not sure it's ever been more difficult than it is right now. But I'm focused on it, and that's really all that I'm focused on.
John in Metairie, you are on the air with Governor Edwards. Hi, John. Good afternoon, John.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hi. It's actually Dustin.
Well, what is your question?
The deadline for the census, when was that?
Well, the
and
deadline
I also have another question.
Well,
okay, the deadline has not actually come yet. It was extended, and we're actually going to be able to I'm looking for that answer right now. October the 31st. It is October the 31st, and you can go to my2020census.gov, my2020census.gov. But it's been extended till Halloween.
All right. We lost Dustin, but Ken in New Orleans. Ken, good afternoon. You're on the air with Governor Edwards. Hi, Ken.
Thank you. Governor, first, thanks to you and your team for the work you guys have been doing during this crisis. And I realize that increased COVID testing results in increased cases being found. But are there specific triggers when COVID upticks in hospitalizations or people placed on ventilators or death would result in you ordering that there needs to be a pullback on the full reopening of the state?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Ken, for the call. And those are things we talk about every single day. The good news is that the positivity rate, the percentage of positive cases that we have relative to the overall number of tests we're administering is well below 10%, which is the goal of the World Health Organization and CDC and others, is to be below 10%. And of course, you want that to be as low as possible. But the reason that you are mostly concerned is you never want to overrun your capacity to deliver health care. And so the relatively good news here is we're doing a lot more testing. We're finding a lot more cases. I say a lot more cases. It's relatively flat, but it is up a little bit over the last several days. But overall, the hospitalizations in the state have been flat. Down today a little bit, up the previous 3 days, but down the week before that. And so it's a mixed bag. But what you really have to be looking for are any trends that indicate that you could be in trouble when it comes to having enough ICU beds and acute care beds and ventilators. We're nowhere near that in any region of our state today, which is a tremendous difference from where we were a couple of months ago. And in fact, I can tell you the number of people on vents has been very, very steady and relatively low for a good while now. And part of that is because the doctors are just doing a much, much better job of either keeping people off ventilators to begin with or getting them off sooner than was the case just a couple of months ago. And much of that pioneering medical work was done here in Louisiana. We had Louisiana doctors giving seminars, called webinars because they did it online, to doctors all over the country, talking about how they were having success keeping people off ventilators and producing better outcomes.
Ken in Ponchatoula. Hi, Ken. You're on the air with the governor.
Good afternoon, Governor. How are you?
Ken, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much.
This is Ken Bickford from Southern Tangipahoa Parish.
All right. What is your question, sir?
Governor, the LSU Board of Supervisors will be meeting on Friday to discuss renaming the Middleton Library. Troy Middleton is a war hero, decorated numerous times, and best known for holding Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, even against General Patton's orders. This man is a sinner, but so are you, and so am I, and so are the extortionists who are accusing him. And I'm wanting to know when in the world we're going to start standing up to the extortionists.
All right. What about changing the name of the LSU Library, Governor, from Troy Middleton to somebody else? Of course, a proud graduate of West Point, such as you, and a great American in wartime, 2 wars, World War I and II. But your thoughts about this controversy?
Yeah, and look, I understand Ken is passionate about this. I wouldn't go anywhere near the term extortionist. I don't believe that extortion is involved here at all. And it's a question of whether in 2020 at LSU, at our flagship campus there, and I guess really at any of our higher education institutions, that we want to have someone's name on a building that causes minority students, in this case African American students, to be uncomfortable. You know, I don't think it's debatable that he was a segregationist, and he didn't want African American students on the campus, and that makes those students uncomfortable. And even though we promote diversity, it certainly seems like a hollow goal of ours to those students, at least. And I think they've raised a valid point on this, and I think we should value diversity. We should respect these students, and we should try to make them feel comfortable, as we should all students. And so the question is, going forward, do you leave the name on the building? And I have to say that I believe we should not going forward, and that does nothing to detract from the record that General Middleton had as a soldier, as a combat veteran, and so forth. But the question is about going forward, and I think we should aspire to do better, to be better, and you have to have conversations. You have to listen, and at some point you have to act. And I think that we're there as it relates to the Middleton Library at LSU. And by the way, we desperately need a new and better library there too, and that should be part of the conversation as well.
All right, quickly, Carmen in New Orleans. We have about 2 minutes to go. Carmen, please be brief.
Okay.
You're on the air.
All right. Hi. I just had a question about whether you might consider extending the suspension of evictions, and if not, how you can justify that to people who've been out of work for months and still are. Thank you.
Evictions for non-payment of rent and that sort of
yeah,
thing?
we suspended a lot of legal deadlines and so forth with the initial proclamations. We continued those. Obviously, you can't keep the courthouses closed and suspend legal deadlines forever. I think as it relates to evictions, that deadline was for the 15th of June. It's been lifted. I will tell you that we are working to deliver a rental assistance program. There'll be more information coming out on that soon. The other thing I can tell you is we've delivered $3.1 billion in unemployment assistance, and so that's the first form of rental assistance. And so I don't believe that's everything that we can and should do, but we're working hard within the means that we have, and quite frankly, working with our congressional delegation and looking forward to what I think will be phase 4 coming out at the end of next month, that hopefully will have some additional funding that we can make available for rental assistance.
Well, Governor, thank you for joining us for show number 51, and hopefully we'll have you back in studio soon. But please be safe. It's a dangerous world, as we know, and it's an interesting world, and we always enjoy your comments.
But thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate you and all the listeners.
You'll be back next month, third Wednesday. So until then, for Matt Doyle, our producer today, and Governor John Bell Edwards, thank you for joining us for show number 51. We'll be back in July.